I am Harold Thompson, 72 years old, a retired high school math teacher living in the same house where I raised my son Desmond. Since my wife passed away 7 years ago, this four-bedroom home has felt too big for just me, but the memories keep me here. That Thursday morning, Desmond called with news that stopped my heart. He declared that his entire family would move in with me, effective immediately. His exact words still ring in my ears. Before I tell you what happened next, leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss real-life stories like this one. For 35 years, I taught algebra and geometry at Lincoln High School. The students kept me young, but nothing brought me more joy than raising my son Desmond. Now at 42, he works as a middle manager at some technology company. His job title changes so often I can hardly keep track. In the early days, Desmond and I were inseparable. Every summer, we would drive to Lake Mackenzie for our annual fishing trips, just the two of us in my old pickup truck. I remember teaching him to drive in the empty school parking lot on weekends, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. When college acceptance letters arrived, I sat with him at the kitchen table as he opened each envelope, his future spreading out before him like a road map. I was so proud when he chose State University, my alma mater. Those 4 years flew by too quickly, and before I knew it, he had his degree in business administration. The distance between us started growing after he met Amanda. They married 12 years ago in a lavish ceremony that cost more than my first house. Marjorie, my late wife, whispered to me during their wedding reception that Amanda seemed more interested in the gifts than the guests. I brushed it off as pre-wedding jitters, but looking back, perhaps my wife saw something I missed. Desmond and Amanda gave me 2 wonderful grandchildren. Jackson, who just turned 10, inherited my love for mathematics and building things. Little Lily, now 7, has her grandmother's artistic talent and kind heart. Despite the growing tension with their parents, seeing my grandchildren always filled the emptiness in my house, if only for brief visits. After Marjorie passed away from breast cancer, this 4-bedroom colonial house became too quiet. We bought it when Desmond was just a toddler, believing we would fill it with more children. But complications from his birth meant Desmond would be our only child. Still, we made this house a home, planting the oak tree in the backyard when we moved in, building the treehouse when Desmond turned 8, marking his height on the kitchen doorframe each birthday. I never considered selling, even when the property taxes kept increasing and the maintenance became more challenging for my aging hands. This home held our family history in its walls. The crack in the living room ceiling from when Desmond tried to practice golf indoors. The stain on the hallway carpet that never quite came out after Marjorie spilled an entire bottle of red wine, celebrating my promotion to department head. The notch in the banister where Desmond crashed his new remote control car on Christmas morning when he was 12. The real trouble began when Judith, Amanda's mother, became a widow 3 years ago. She sold her house in Florida and moved into a small apartment near Desmond and Amanda to be closer to her grandchildren. From her first visit to my home, Judith made her disapproval clear. She wrinkled her nose at the worn furniture Marjorie and I had chosen together, suggested I hire a proper cleaning service, and once even brought her own sheets when staying overnight, because mine weren't the right thread count. To be fair, my house showing its age. The wallpaper in the dining room had started peeling at the corners. Some floorboards in the hallway creaked louder than they used to. The kitchen cabinets needed repainting. But it was still my home, filled with memories I wasn't ready to part with. Judith never missed an opportunity to comment on how Marjorie would have kept things differently, though she had only met my wife twice before her passing. These remarks stung the most, but I bit my tongue for Desmond's sake. Family harmony seemed more important than defending myself against an opinionated woman who seemed determined to find fault with everything I did. Amanda wasn't much better. During their infrequent visits, she would constantly check her watch, making it clear that spending time with me was an obligation rather than a choice. She would bring expensive store-bought desserts when I invited them for dinner, despite knowing I enjoyed baking for my family. It felt like a subtle criticism of my capabilities. Still, I cherished those visits because they brought Jackson and Lily into my home. I converted Desmond's old bedroom into a space just for them, with bunk beds, colorful rugs, and shelves filled with toys and books. Whenever they stayed overnight, which happened perhaps 3 times a year, I would make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs and tell them stories about their father's childhood until they fell asleep. Those rare happy moments made the loneliness bearable. Most days, I filled my time with volunteer work at the local library, coffee with other retired teachers, and tending to my vegetable garden. Not the retirement Marjorie and I had planned, but peaceful enough. The frequency of Desmond's calls and visits had been declining steadily over the past 5 years. Where we once spoke several times a week, it dwindled to once monthly, then special occasions only. The pattern became painfully predictable. When my phone displayed his number, it usually meant he needed something. 3 years ago, he called to ask if he could borrow $8,000 for a down payment on a newer, larger car. His promotion came with expectations, he explained, and showing up in his 5-year-old sedan wasn't making the right impression. I transferred the money that afternoon. He promised to pay me back in 6 months. I'm still waiting. Then came the request for $3,000 when their refrigerator broke, another $2,000 when Jackson needed braces insurance wouldn't fully cover, $1,500 for a family vacation to the beach because they all needed a break from stress. Each time, Desmond assured me it was just a temporary loan. Each time, repayment never materialized. The worst was last Christmas, when he called asking for $10,000 to cover credit card debt. Amanda had apparently gone overboard with holiday shopping, determined that her children would have the best gifts in their social circle. I had to withdraw from my retirement account, incurring penalties. But Desmond sounded desperate. When I mentioned the penalties, he quickly changed the subject to Jackson's basketball tournament. I never intended to keep track of these loans, but they added up to nearly $25,000 over the past 3 years. Money that was supposed to support my retirement years now supported my son's lifestyle. Marjorie would have been more firm, setting boundaries I couldn't seem to establish. The rare family visits became increasingly uncomfortable. Amanda would sit stiffly on my couch, scrolling through her phone, participating minimally in conversation. She once suggested they meet me at a restaurant instead, because the dust in my home triggered her allergies. I spent 3 days deep cleaning before their next visit. She still sneezed dramatically throughout dinner. Judith became a regular addition to these family gatherings about 2 years ago. She would walk through my home like a health inspector, running her finger along bookshelves, checking for dust, repositioning picture frames I had intentionally arranged, offering unsolicited advice on more modern decor. Once, she brought a scented candle as a gift, explaining pointedly that it would help with the musty smell she detected. I never lit it. The most painful comments were about Marjorie. Judith would say things like, "I imagine Marjorie would have updated these curtains by now," or "Marjorie surely wouldn't have let the garden get so overgrown." Each remark felt like a small knife between my ribs. Marjorie had been gone 7 years, but Judith spoke as if she had intimate knowledge of my wife's preferences. Through it all, I remained patient. When Jackson wanted to show me his science project through video call, I learned how to use FaceTime. When Lily sent me drawings in the mail, I framed each one and sent her photos of them hanging in my hallway. I attended every school performance I was invited to, sitting alone while Desmond and Amanda sat with Judith and her friends from her bridge club. Gradually, I began to suspect Desmond viewed me as nothing more than a convenient ATM with babysitting capabilities. The realization came slowly, like a fog lifting to reveal an unwelcome landscape. The son who once called just to share a funny story now only called with his hand out. Last Thanksgiving, they arrived 2 hours late for dinner. The turkey had dried out, the potatoes congealed, but I reheated everything without complaint. They stayed for precisely 90 minutes before Amanda announced they had another engagement. As they gathered their coats, Desmond asked if I could watch the kids the following weekend while they attended a work function. No details about the event, no genuine interest in my availability, just an expectation of compliance. I agreed, of course. Those weekends with Jackson and Lily were precious. We built pillow forts, baked cookies from Marjorie's recipe cards, and watched old movies together. Jackson once asked why they didn't visit more often, and my heart broke at the innocent question. I simply told him, adults get busy, but that I was always thinking of them. The most revealing incident happened about 6 months ago. Desmond called on a Tuesday afternoon, asking if I could loan him $1,200 for car repairs. When I hesitated, mentioning that I had just paid for a new water heater, his tone changed instantly. Gone was the warmth, replaced by cool distance. He quickly said never mind, he would figure something out, and hung up. He didn't call again for 3 weeks. That moment crystallized what our relationship had become. When I couldn't provide financial support, I apparently had little value to my son. The thought kept me awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I had gone wrong as a parent. The morning that changed everything started like any other Thursday. I was having my coffee on the back porch, watching cardinals at the bird feeder, when my phone rang at 8:32. Seeing Desmond's name flash on the screen, I felt the usual mixture of joy and apprehension. Calls this early usually meant trouble. "Dad," he said without preamble, his voice tense but determined. "We need to talk about something important." I settled deeper into my chair, bracing myself. "Good morning to you too, son. Is everyone okay?" "Not really," he replied, and I heard him take a deep breath. "We're in a bit of a situation. The landlord raised our rent by $600 a month. Completely unreasonable, but he says property values in the area have skyrocketed. We can't afford it." "That's significant," I agreed, mentally calculating what kind of loan he might ask for this time. "Have you looked at other apartments?" "We've been looking for weeks. Everything in a decent school district is even more expensive, and with Judith's lease ending next month too." He trailed off, then his voice hardened with resolve. "Look, Dad, there's no easy way to say this. We've been talking as a family, and we've decided the best solution is for all of us to move in with you." The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand. "All of you? You mean you, Amanda, the kids, and Judith?" "Yes. Your house has 4 bedrooms. You're rattling around in that big place all by yourself. It makes sense. The kids can share a room. Amanda and I will take the master bedroom. Judith can have the guest room, and you can keep your study with the pull-out sofa." My study. The smallest bedroom in the house, which I had converted into a reading room after Marjorie passed. He expected me to give up my bedroom in my own home. "Desmond, I don't think this is a good idea," I said carefully. 5 people moving in would completely change my routine. And frankly, I'm not sure we all get along well enough to live under one roof. "Dad, it's not about getting along. It's about family, taking care of family. You always taught me that." "Yes, but there are boundaries and proper discussions before major decisions." His voice took on an edge I rarely heard. "We're cramped in our apartment. The kids need more space. Judith's place is too small for her to take us in. Your house is the logical solution. I understand you're in a difficult situation, but moving everyone in here requires more thought. Maybe we could help you with a security deposit for a new place, or look at other options." "There are no other options," he cut me off. "Look, Dad, I didn't call to debate this. My wife, the children, and the mother-in-law are going to live there. We're cramped in the apartment. There's no point in complaining. It's already been decided." The finality in his tone stunned me. Not a request, a declaration, as if my home was community property and my opinion irrelevant. "Desmond, you can't just decide something like this without consulting me. This is my house. It's the family house," he corrected, his voice rising. "The house I grew up in. The house that's sitting mostly empty while we're crammed into a 1,000-square-foot apartment with Judith having to sleep on our couch when she watches the kids. That doesn't give you the right to make unilateral decisions about my living arrangements." "Dad, I don't have time for this. Amanda's already given notice at our apartment. We'll be there Saturday morning. We can figure out the details then." "Saturday? This Saturday? That's less than 48 hours from now. The sooner we move in, the sooner we stop paying rent we can't afford. Judith is packing her place up today. I've rented a moving truck for Saturday at 7 a.m. We should be at your place by noon. Words failed me. The audacity, the presumption that I would simply acquiesce to this invasion of my space, my privacy, my life. Son, we need to discuss this further. This isn't, I've got to go, Dad. Meeting starting. See you Saturday. And with that, the line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, mouth open in disbelief. For several minutes I couldn't move, couldn't process what had just happened. My son had effectively informed me that my home was being requisitioned, my life reorganized, without so much as a proper conversation. The Cardinals continued their cheerful breakfast at the feeder, oblivious to my world tilting on its axis. The coffee in my cup had grown cold, much like the feeling spreading through my chest. I remained frozen in my porch chair long after the call ended, watching the morning sun climb higher without registering the passage of time. Eventually, I moved to the living room, sinking into the recliner Marjorie had insisted we buy when arthritis started bothering my back. The house felt different suddenly, as if the walls were already bracing for invasion. Memories flooded unbidden. Desmond taking his first steps across this very room, arms outstretched toward me, face bright with accomplishment. Teaching him to tie his shoes on the bottom stair. The Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, everyday moments that formed the tapestry of our family life. I had been a dedicated father, working extra summer school sessions to save for his college fund, attending every soccer game, despite my distaste for the sport, proofreading countless school essays late into the night. Marjorie and I had structured our lives around giving Desmond every opportunity, every advantage we could manage on teachers' salaries. Where had I gone wrong? Had our support fostered entitlement rather than gratitude? The thought brought a wave of sadness so intense I had to close my eyes against it. And now, after years of increasingly infrequent visits and calls that always ended with requests for money, my son felt entitled to commandeer my home. Not only for himself and his immediate family, which might have been negotiable with proper discussion, but for his mother-in-law as well. A woman who had made no secret of her disdain for me and my home. I tried to imagine what daily life would look like with all of them here. Amanda rearranging furniture without asking, declaring my beloved worn leather couch unsightly, and insisting it be replaced. Judith inspecting the refrigerator contents with pursed lips, commenting on my unhealthy eating habits. The children, whom I adored, nevertheless bringing constant noise and chaos to my quiet routines. And me, relegated to the smallest bedroom, expected to adjust my life around their schedules, preferences, and demands. Would I need permission to watch my favorite programs on the television I had purchased? Would mealtimes be dictated by their work schedules? Would I be consulted about household decisions, or merely informed after the fact, as with this moving plan? My morning ritual of coffee on the porch, while watching birds, would likely become impossible with everyone rushing to school and work. My evening reading time would be disrupted by children's homework, television shows, and family discussions that increasingly excluded me. Most painful was the realization that Desmond hadn't asked if this arrangement would work for me, hadn't acknowledged that at 72 I had earned the right to peace in my own home, hadn't recognized that this house, while spacious for one person, would be cramped for 6. Hadn't considered that his mother-in-law and I barely tolerated each other during brief visits, let alone continuous cohabitation. He had simply decided, as if my feelings, my wishes, my very autonomy were irrelevant, as if I existed solely to solve his problems. The more I contemplated the situation, the more my sadness gave way to indignation. I had not raised my son to be so thoughtless, so presumptuous. Marjorie would be heartbroken to see the entitled adult our loving parenting had somehow produced. My thoughts turned to Marjorie. In our 39 years of marriage, she had been the practical one, the boundary setter. "Harold," she would say, "you can be too accommodating sometimes. It's okay to say no when people ask too much." She had been right, of course. My desire to keep peace, to be liked, to avoid conflict, had often led me to accept situations that made me unhappy. What would Marjorie advise now? The answer came with surprising clarity. She would tell me to stand up for myself, to remember that love doesn't mean becoming a doormat, that teaching people to respect your boundaries is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them. I glanced at the family photo on the mantel, taken on our 30th anniversary. Marjorie's eyes seemed to meet mine across time, giving me the strength I suddenly knew I would need. The practical concerns were significant. 5 people moving in would more than triple the utility bills. Grocery expenses would skyrocket. The wear and tear on the house would accelerate. Had Desmond considered how these costs would be shared? Or did he assume I would absorb them all? Given his history of unpaid loans, the latter seemed more likely. And what about my social life? Limited as it was, I valued my weekly card game with fellow retirees, my volunteer shifts at the hospital, my occasional dinner with Marjorie's sister when she visited from Ohio. Would these activities be viewed as inconvenient to the new household schedule? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this arrangement would be disastrous for everyone involved. Resentment would build quickly, tensions would flare. The children would witness arguments and strained interactions. Any genuine family bonds would be stretched to breaking point by the stress of overcrowding and conflicting expectations. Despite my growing conviction that I needed to prevent this ill-conceived plan, uncertainty gnawed at me. Desmond was still my son. The children were still my beloved grandchildren. Was I being selfish? Would refusing to help them in their time of need irreparably damage our relationship? But then again, what kind of relationship did we currently have? One where I was valued for what I could provide, not who I was. One where major decisions affecting my life could be made without my input or consent. One where family takes care of family seemed to flow in only one direction. As the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed noon, something shifted within me. A resolution formed, crystallizing from the swirling thoughts and emotions of the past hours. I would not be steamrolled in my own home. I would not surrender my dignity, my peace, my final years to an arrangement that showed so little regard for my needs and feelings. I needed advice from someone who would be honest with me. Someone who understood family dynamics but wouldn't be swayed by sentiment alone. Someone like Frank. Frank Weber had been my closest friend since we started teaching at Lincoln High together 40 years ago. A former football coach turned history teacher, he never minced words or softened blows. After Marjorie died, he checked on me every day for months, sometimes just sitting silently while I grieved. Other times practically dragging me out of the house when isolation threatened to consume me. I called him immediately, grateful when he answered on the second ring. "Harold, I was just thinking about you. Martha made too much lasagna last night. I was going to bring some over later. Thanks, Frank, but I've got a situation here." I explained Desmond's call and declaration that the entire family would move in within 2 days. Frank's explosive response contained language I won't repeat. When he calmed down, his advice was unequivocal. "Harold, this is elder abuse. Plain and simple, they're taking advantage of you, and it's going to get worse if you let them move in. You need to put your foot down." "But they're family," I protested weakly. "They need help. Needing help and demanding your home are two different things. Look, I've watched Desmond treat you like a bank for years. You deserve better. And frankly, he needs a wake-up call before he completely destroys your relationship. What do you suggest?" "If I were you," Frank said slowly, "I'd teach him a lesson he won't forget. Something dramatic enough to make him realize he can't treat you this way." "Like what?" "That's for you to decide. But whatever you do, don't let them steamroll you. You've worked too hard your whole life to be pushed around now." After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, weighing options. I could simply refuse, tell Desmond they couldn't move in, but given his declaration that it was already decided, and the fact they'd given notice on their apartment, this approach seemed destined for a messy, emotional confrontation with 5 people and their belongings on my doorstep. I could agree to a temporary arrangement with strict conditions. But boundaries already seemed meaningless to Desmond, and temporary has a way of becoming permanent when it's convenient for some parties. I could move out temporarily myself, stay with Frank, or at a hotel, until Desmond realized the imposition he was making. But that meant surrendering my home, possibly for an extended period. None of these options felt right. They either led to immediate conflict or required me to inconvenience myself, while Desmond faced no consequences for his presumption. Then, as I gazed around the kitchen where I had taught Desmond to make pancakes, where Marjorie and I had shared thousands of meals, where family holidays had centered for decades, an idea began forming. A radical idea that made my heart race with anxiety yet felt strangely right. What if I simply wasn't here when they arrived? What if the house wasn't available? My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the phone and called Barbara Mills, a real estate agent who had left her card after helping my neighbor sell his home last year. "Mr. Thompson, what a pleasure. Are you considering selling your home?" "Possibly," I replied, surprised at the steadiness in my voice. How quickly could it happen if I decided to proceed? Barbara explained that in the current market, with inventory low and demand high, we could potentially close in as little as 2 weeks with the right buyer. The neighborhood had become increasingly desirable, and my 4-bedroom colonial on a quarter-acre lot would likely attract significant interest. Next, I called my bank and was connected to a financial advisor who confirmed what I suspected. Between my pension, Social Security, and modest investments, I could comfortably afford a smaller place. In fact, downsizing might improve my financial security in the long run. A quick search online revealed several attractive senior living communities nearby. Not nursing homes or assisted living facilities, but independent apartments and condos designed for active seniors, with amenities like fitness centers, organized activities, and maintenance included. One complex in particular caught my eye: Pine Ridge Gardens, just 3 miles from my current home. They had a 2-bedroom unit available immediately. The photos showed bright, modern interiors, a small balcony overlooking a pond, and walking trails throughout the property. I called and scheduled a tour for that afternoon. The Pine Ridge unit exceeded my expectations. Spacious enough for my essential belongings, but small enough to maintain easily. The monthly fees covered all utilities except phone and internet, plus lawn care and building maintenance. Best of all, it was a first-floor unit with no stairs to navigate as my mobility potentially decreased with age. "We normally have a waiting list," the property manager explained, "but the previous tenant moved unexpectedly to be closer to family. If you're interested, we could have you in by next week." I put down a deposit on the spot. Back home, I called Frank to help me formulate the rest of my plan. He arrived within the hour, Martha's promised lasagna in hand, and we sat at the kitchen table strategizing like generals before a campaign. "You'll need movers," he pointed out, "and fast." I found a company with availability the next day for an additional rush fee. They would pack and move my essential items to the new apartment and store the rest temporarily. "What about the house itself?" Frank asked. "Even if you list it today, it won't sell before Saturday." I explained my conversation with Barbara Mills, who had suggested an investor client of hers who bought properties for cash, often closing within days. The trade-off was accepting a price slightly below market value, but speed was more important to me than maximizing profit. "And what will you tell Desmond?" That was the hardest question. I considered calling him immediately, but realized he would likely try to talk me out of my decision or, worse, rush over with his family before I could execute my plan. No, better to leave a letter explaining my reasons and my new contact information. Frank helped me draft the letter, tempering my anger with reason, ensuring the tone remained firm but not vindictive. We emphasized that I loved Desmond and his family, but could not accept being treated with such disregard. By evening, my plan was set in motion. Barbara had arranged for her investor client to view the house first thing in the morning. The movers would arrive at 9. I had signed a lease for the Pine Ridge apartment with a move-in date of Friday, the day before Desmond planned to arrive. That night, I walked through each room of the house, saying goodbye to the space that had been my home for nearly 4 decades. In Desmond's old room, I carefully removed the growth chart marked on the closet door frame, wrapped it in bubble wrap, and set it aside to take with me. Some memories were too precious to leave behind. Friday morning arrived with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The previous day had been a whirlwind of activity. Barbara's investor client had offered a fair price for the house in its current condition, no repairs or staging needed. We signed the papers that same afternoon, with closing scheduled for the following week. I would receive a cashier's check for the full amount, minus the remaining mortgage balance, which was minimal. The movers had efficiently packed my essential belongings. My clothes, Marjorie's china, photo albums, and important documents were already in the new apartment. My trusty recliner sat in the living room, alongside a few other favorite pieces. Most of our furniture would go to a consignment store, with proceeds donated to the education fund we had established at Lincoln High after Marjorie's passing. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Desmond to call with an update on their plans, giving me an opportunity to explain mine. But my phone remained silent. It seemed the next communication would be as planned. Through the letter I carefully placed on the kitchen counter, weighted down with the ceramic apple paperweight Desmond had made in 5th grade art class. The letter read, "Dear Desmond, by the time you read this, I will have moved to Pine Ridge Gardens Senior Community. My new address and phone number are listed below. Your call on Thursday made me realize several things. First, that you view my home as yours to dispose of without consultation. Second, that you consider my feelings and preferences secondary to your convenience. And third, that our relationship has become unbalanced in ways that are harmful to both of us. I have sold the house. The new owners will take possession next week. I've left the key to the storage unit containing items you might want on the hook by the door. This decision wasn't made lightly or in anger. It was made because I deserve respect and autonomy, particularly in my later years. I love you, Amanda, Jackson, and Lily. I want a relationship with all of you, but that relationship must be built on mutual respect, not obligation or convenience. I am available to help you find new housing that fits your budget. I am available to spend time with my grandchildren. I am available for family dinners and celebrations. What I am no longer available for is being taken for granted or treated as an afterthought in decisions that profoundly affect my life. Call me when you're ready to talk. With love, Dad. I read it 3 times, making sure the tone was firm, but not cruel. This wasn't about punishment, but boundaries. Not about rejecting my family, but requiring respect from them. At 11:30 Saturday morning, I sat in my new living room at Pine Ridge, watching the clock and imagining Desmond's arrival at the old house. Noon came and went. At 12:23, my phone rang. Desmond's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello, son." "Dad? Where are you? What's going on?" His voice was high with panic. "There's a letter here saying you sold the house? This has to be some kind of joke." "It's not a joke, Desmond. I've moved to Pine Ridge Gardens and sold the house. The letter explains my reasons. But we're here, with all our stuff. The moving truck is in the driveway. Judith already gave notice at her apartment. Where are we supposed to go?" "You might have considered that question before deciding to move into my home without proper discussion," I said quietly. "As for where to go, I suggest a hotel for tonight while you figure out your next steps." "A hotel? With 2 kids and my mother-in-law? Are you serious?" "Completely serious. Just as you were when you informed me your family would be moving into my home without asking if that arrangement would work for me." "Dad, this is insane. You can't just sell your house because you're angry at me." "I'm not angry, Desmond. I'm establishing boundaries that should have been in place long ago. And yes, I can sell my house. It was mine to sell, just as it would have been mine to invite you to share had you approached the situation with respect rather than entitlement." In the background, I could hear Amanda's voice rising in distress, Judith making sharp comments about my mental stability, and the children asking questions no one was answering. "Put me on speaker," I requested. When Desmond complied, I continued, "Amanda, Judith, I apologize for the inconvenience, But this situation could have been avoided with proper communication and respect. Respect? Judith's voice cut through sharply. You abandoned your family when they needed you. What kind of father does that? The kind who taught his son to ask, not demand. The kind who expects to be consulted about major decisions affecting his life. The kind who values himself enough to not become a doormat. Amanda spoke next, her voice tight with anger. Harold, we have nowhere to go. We gave notice at our apartment. The landlord has already found new tenants. We literally have nowhere to sleep tonight. I understand that's stressful, I replied calmly. I've made a reservation for you at the Extended Stay America on Riverside Drive. It's paid for 1 week. That should give you time to figure out your next steps. Silence fell. I hadn't planned this part, but last night it had occurred to me that they truly would be in a difficult position. Despite everything, I didn't want my grandchildren sleeping in a car. You made hotel reservations for us? Desmond finally asked, his tone softer. Yes. Under your name. Check-in is available now. Dad. His voice cracked slightly. We can't afford a long-term hotel stay. I know. That's why I'm offering to help you find a new apartment and assist with the security deposit and first month's rent. What I won't do is surrender my home and my dignity. More silence. Then I heard muffled conversation, too quiet to make out. Finally, Desmond came back on the line, no longer on speaker. Dad, can we talk? Just the two of us? Maybe tomorrow after we get settled at the hotel? Yes, I think that would be a good idea. There's a coffee shop here at Pine Ridge. Why don't you meet me there around 10? Okay, he agreed, sounding suddenly exhausted. I'll be there. After we hung up, I sat staring out at the pond behind my new home, watching ducks glide across the surface. The confrontation had gone both better and worse than I had imagined. The shock and desperation in Desmond's voice had been painful to hear. The children's confused questions in the background had tugged at my heart, but beneath the immediate distress, I had detected something else in my son's final request to talk. A hint of recognition, perhaps. A glimmer of understanding that something fundamental needed to change. Only time would tell if my drastic action had made the impact I hoped for, whether it would push Desmond toward greater respect and independence, or drive a permanent wedge between us. All I knew for certain was that for the first time in years, I had stood up for myself, set a boundary, and refused to be taken advantage of. Whatever came next, I would face it with the self-respect Marjorie had always urged me to maintain. The Pine Ridge Coffee Shop offered a serene view of the gardens, with comfortable seating and surprisingly good pastries. I arrived early, securing a quiet cornered table where we could talk privately. Desmond walked in at precisely 10, looking tired but composed. He wore the blue button-down shirt I had given him last Christmas, which I took as a small but meaningful gesture. Thanks for meeting me, he said, settling into the chair across from me. This is a nice place. It is, I agreed. The people are friendly, and they have activities every day. Book clubs, card games, movie nights. I've already signed up for the gardening committee. An awkward silence followed as the server brought coffee for Desmond. I waited, letting him gather his thoughts. Dad, he finally began. I owe you an apology. A big one. The way I handled this situation was completely wrong. I shouldn't have made decisions about your home without consulting you. I shouldn't have assumed you would just go along with our plan. I nodded, acknowledging his words but waiting for more. The truth is, he continued, staring into his coffee, I've been taking you for granted for a long time. The loans, the babysitting, the emotional support. I've been treating you like a resource rather than a person with your own life and needs. Why? I asked simply. He looked up, surprised by the directness of my question. I don't know. It happened gradually. After Mom died, you seemed so eager to help with anything we needed. And we did need help, especially when Judith moved up here and added to our responsibilities. But somewhere along the way, your willingness to help became an expectation, then an entitlement. And the money? I pressed gently. Color rose in his cheeks. We've been living beyond our means. Amanda lost her job last year and has only found part-time work since. We didn't tell you because I was ashamed. A 42-year-old man should be able to support his family without running to his elderly father for help. Yes, he should, I agreed. But shame isn't productive, Desmond. Honesty would have been better. We could have talked about realistic solutions instead of you taking my support for granted and me growing increasingly resentful. He nodded, looking genuinely contrite. You're right. I'm sorry, Dad, for everything. For the loans I never repaid. For the inconsiderate way we've treated you during visits. For trying to take over your home without discussion. Thank you for that, I said, feeling a weight lifting. I accept your apology. But an apology is just the beginning. We need to reset our relationship on healthier terms. Over the next hour, we talked more openly than we had in years. Desmond explained their financial situation in detail, including the significant credit card debt they had accumulated. I shared my feelings of being used and undervalued, of watching our relationship deteriorate into transactions rather than genuine connection. What do we do now? Desmond asked eventually. Practically speaking, we need to find a place to live within our actual budget. I've been thinking about that, I said. I spoke with Barbara Mills, the real estate agent who handled the sale of my house. She knows of several 3-bedroom townhomes for rent in a decent area. The school district isn't as prestigious as your current one, but the elementary school has good ratings. And the rent? About 30% less than what you were paying. It would mean some lifestyle adjustments, but it would be sustainable on your income alone, even without Amanda finding full-time work right away. He looked skeptical. The kids are used to certain things, and Amanda has expectations. Expectations can change when reality requires it, I pointed out. Your mother and I raised you on 2 teachers' salaries. We didn't have luxury vacations or designer clothes, but you never lacked for anything important. Desmond was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. Again, we need to live within our means, not keep chasing a lifestyle we can't afford. What about Judith? I asked. Will she need her own place? He sighed heavily. That's complicated. She can't really afford to live alone anymore. Her Social Security barely covered her last apartment. That's partly why we thought moving everyone into your house made sense. There's a 1-bedroom unit available here at Pine Ridge, I suggested. The monthly fee would be manageable with her Social Security if she no longer has to help with your family expenses. And she'd have built-in social activities and transportation services. You'd want her living near you? After everything? I chuckled. Want might be too strong a word. But it would be a practical solution. And perhaps having her own community would make her less inclined to critique everyone else's choices. By the time we parted that day, we had the outline of a plan. Desmond would tour the townhomes that afternoon. I would introduce Judith to the Pine Ridge management on Tuesday. Most importantly, we had begun rebuilding trust through honest communication. The following 6 months brought significant changes for all of us. Desmond and his family moved into one of the townhomes I had suggested. It was smaller than they were used to, but the lower rent allowed them to start addressing their debt. Amanda initially complained about the downgrade, but eventually embraced the challenge of making the new space welcoming on a budget. To everyone's surprise, Judith thrived at Pine Ridge. She joined the drama club, took water aerobics classes, and even started dating a widower from the 3rd floor. Having her own friends and activities made her less critical during family gatherings. She and I maintained a polite distance, occasionally sharing a meal in the community dining room, but mostly leading separate lives within the same complex. Most importantly, my relationship with Desmond evolved into something healthier. We established a tradition of Sunday dinners, alternating between my apartment and their townhome. He stopped asking for loans, instead occasionally seeking advice on budgeting and financial management. When he received a modest bonus at work, he insisted on repaying $1,000 of what he owed me, promising regular payments moving forward. Jackson and Lily adjusted well to their new school and neighborhood. They visited me often, helping tend my small container garden on the patio and joining me for swimming in the Pine Ridge pool. Jackson even signed up for the intergenerational chess club where I volunteered, giving us precious one-on-one time. Amanda and I reached a tentative truce. While we would never be close, she made genuine efforts to be more welcoming during my visits. She thanked me for the financial guidance that was helping them become more stable, and even asked for Marjorie's recipe for apple crisp that the children loved when I made it. One evening in late autumn, as Desmond and I sat on my balcony watching the sunset after a family dinner, he turned to me with unusual seriousness. "Dad, I want to thank you for what you did. Selling the house, refusing to let us move in. It seemed cruel at the time, but it was exactly what we needed. Sometimes love means doing the difficult thing," I replied. "Your mother always said that." "She was right," he nodded. "If you had let us move in, we would never have addressed our real problems. I would have kept avoiding financial responsibility. Amanda would have kept spending beyond our means. The kids would have learned all the wrong lessons about family and money. And now we're standing on our own feet. It's harder in some ways, but better. I respect myself more. I respect you more too." Those words meant everything to me. The month since my drastic decision had been challenging for all of us, but ultimately healing. By refusing to be a doormat, I had actually strengthened our family bonds rather than severing them. The lesson wasn't just for Desmond. I too had learned something valuable. That love without boundaries isn't truly love at all. That respecting yourself is necessary before others can respect you. That sometimes the most caring thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their poor choices. As we move forward as a family, I know there will be more challenges. Financial habits don't change overnight. Old patterns of interaction can resurface in times of stress. But we now have a foundation of honesty and mutual respect that was missing before. Sometimes, the best way to love someone is to teach them to respect you, even when that lesson is painful. In the end, true love grows stronger when built on a foundation of mutual respect. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? What was the outcome? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to establish healthy boundaries in their own relationships. Thank you for joining me for this personal story. And remember that it's never too late to change a relationship for the better.